Hi everyone. Sorry I'm a little late. I was on a call learning all about sex. Very important part of motherhood. Something that we don't talk about as much, especially once we're done having babies. When we're not done having babies. Anyway, sorry I'm late. I'm going to share this to the few places that I already told people I would share it to, and then we'll get started. It's going to be super fun. Live. It's going to be much more woo than I usually talk. People who, sorry guys, my hair, when it's like down, it drives me nuts. It makes me feel like a little boy, so I gotta always spick it up. Even though now I feel like maybe I look more like a boy. Whatever. What are we doing? Okay, sharing. Hello everyone. How are you all doing today? Share. Freaking Facebook. Wounding. Okay. Hi everyone, say hello when you pop on. I love to know who's actually watching. It's gotta be my favorite. Why is it? Oh, duh. Gotta make sure your lives are public so I can share it places. Duh. Okay. Try again. One more time. Let me know also, even if you're just catching the replay, like, what do you know about generational wounding at all? Like, are you aware that this is a thing? Have you heard of it before? Like, I'd love to gauge where people are at when it comes to their knowledge of this. In a group. One more. And last place, and then I'll close these down so I'm not distracted. So I just have to keep it up because sometimes the comments don't come up on my phone and they show up online. It's really dumb, but whatever. There we go. Moon Goddess Tribe, last one. No, the ladies in the Moon Goddess Tribe are waiting for that. Okay, cool. There we go. Okay, I'm here for real this time. Sorry, everyone. So I wanted to talk to you guys about this generational wounding because it is something that has been coming up a lot with the market research that I've been doing recently. A lot of you might have noticed that I've been kind of changing my niche, my group that I'm serving, and it's not so much about just like general self-care, and instead it's really diving into the maternal self-care and going all the way back to pretty much the dawn of creation, like the first baby to ever be born, because there's been such intense stigma around birth. I'd say mostly the last 2,000 years, even 5,000 years, ever since the like patriarchy really took over. But honestly, like, every time a mother gives birth, she is imprinting her energy onto the child, and part of the process, hi Sean, part of the process that occurs when you actually give birth versus when there's a traumatic birth experience, which, whether it was scheduled or not, cesarean is a very traumatic way to be born and way to give birth. So there's a lot of energy that goes around the birthing process that when you are able to birth 100% naturally, the way that you wanted it, the way that you had maybe not planned, because birth never goes exactly as planned, but in the setting that you wanted it to be, then it can be a very healing experience. It can be a very healing experience and a very good way to start processing. Hi Lamorla, how are you doing? A really good way to start processing your the generational wounding, because as moms, the number one thing that I hear from moms is that they know that they don't want to parent the way that they parented or were parented. So they know exactly what they don't want to do as moms. They don't want to spank. They don't want to put their kids in timeout. They don't want to feed them a bunch of junk food. They don't want to, but they don't know what they do want to do. They don't know how they want to parent. I have been inviting a lot of these moms that I talk to start writing standards down as a motherhood. So what are your values as a mother? What are your standards as a mother? Like as a person, like you have standards that you have created. My live yesterday was all about politics, meaning in just the sense that like they help you build standards, and religion does the same thing as well. Community, like we build our standards outside of our values outside of ourselves, and the standards we build within ourselves. And once we have built a strong enough set of values to use as a sounding board, we're able to then stand strong in our standards, and our standards might shift a little bit. Values are very rigid, and standards are more creatively flexible, but they have their basis in the values that were created outside of us. All of this can be passed down from generation to generation to generation. So even though you now, with whatever knowledge you have, don't want to parent the way you were parented, you are still holding on to the generational wounding of your mother when she gave birth to you because of how she was parented. And then how her mother was parented was passed down to her. And then so you're also getting your grandmothers, and all the way, and that's why I say generational wounding goes back all the way to the beginning of your bloodline, which is everyone's bloodline, right? If we believe the Catholic, the Bible version, nobody really knows where we came from. We could all be, souls that have just created matter around ourselves, and there's not really an original family member. But, it could be. So when I talk about generational wounding and healing from your births, the other reason why I talk about that is because I've noticed a very strong, birthing is my thing, okay? So a lot of you guys might not know my story. I'll do a really quick synopsis as it hits 2:22 here. Birthing is my thing. In 2014, I became pregnant for the second time, and because of how traumatic my first birth was, that even though I didn't end up having cesarean, I almost did, and had I not had a very well-educated doula, I absolutely would have had a cesarean. And then I watched for the next 6 years as friend after friend after friend planned on giving birth naturally, didn't do any fucking research to know how to do that, just trust it, somehow like assume that if her body knew how to make a baby, she was going to know how to birth, and then went in and had Pitocin given, then the epidural, and then all these complications, and then all of a sudden here you are having an emergency C-section, versus like, I could say out of everyone, I can think of 2 people that actually had like a legitimate emergency. One of them had a grand mal seizure in the middle of her hypnobirthing, like she didn't have anything hooked up to her at all, and she had a grand mal seizure and ended up needing an actual emergency C-section where they put her completely under. And the second one, they realized that the baby's cord was wrapped around his neck like 3 different times, and he was not going to be able to safely come out, and so they did a C-section, took him out, and it was actually wrapped like 5 times. It was really, like, that baby would not have survived. But every other one, it starts with like, my water broke, and then I got there and they started with Pitocin. Like, the amount of women whose birth stories end in cesarean and you follow it back, the beginning usually is an intervention that started it all, Pitocin or the epidural, or they broke my water, or whatever it was. And then even past that, like, maybe you didn't get all the way to a C-section. Maybe they used the suction cup on your baby's head, or maybe they used the forceps, or maybe you had to push for like 4 fucking hours and then they still did the C-section. Or like, the way that we birth is an experience that so many women actually they block it out. And if you go back to our grandmothers, they were doing something called twilight birthing. And I want to Google it so that I give you guys the exact definition. So, giving birth in the early to mid 1900s. it's really brutal. If you ever want to look up and see like how your parents were probably born and your grandparents were probably born, um, until the 1800s, most women gave birth at home, and usually under the help of other women, and there was a midwife, and it was very much a woman-to-woman experience. There were times in our history going back to the Middle Ages where they thought it was the curse of Eve. Like, there's literally a thing called the curse of Eve, which is childbirth. So imagine this. The most beautiful thing in the world, that's supposed to be in the world, of birthing the next generation for a couple of hundred years in Eastern Europe, not Eastern, Western Europe, under the Christianity and things like that, they called childbirth the curse of Eve. The pain, the crying, the screaming, the blood, all of that. And they would take a woman, and instead of allowing her to be surrounded by community and to be surrounded by women who were midwives, because all of those women, they'd been burned at the stake already. All, like, midwives were a huge part of the people who were witches during the Inquisition. So this Inquisition and the curse of Eve, like, put those in your, like, timeline in your brain of history of things that you've ever learned in your life. Like, think about the time of the Inquisition, like Salem witch trials, like that whole like chunk of history, okay? We realize this isn't everywhere in the world, okay? There are still women today that birth beautifully and naturally and safely, and we're going to get into that in a minute. So there is a chunk in many of our histories as Americans where women in our bloodline went into labor, and instead of being surrounded by women and knowing what to do, were put into a room by themselves to fucking deal with it. And they weren't educated up to this point before that. Most women weren't even educated at all. They completely depended on their husbands. This is when husbands stopped being involved as well, and they just waited outside the door until their wife either died, the baby died, or she emerged miraculously having birthed a child without any help at all, screaming for days. Like, this is imprinted in our genetic coding now. When you hear about DNA, they talk about like your DNA, and they talk about like this much of our DNA is like related to pigs, and this much of our DNA is related to chimpanzees. And when they look at our DNA, they have specified a whole chunk of our DNA that they call junk DNA, where they don't really know what it does. And when you go into the metaphysical, what we're finding is those are where the genetic codes are laid for your genetic upgrades, where you can actually up level your energy fields. So you look over here behind me, and you've got this beautiful person, and she's got all of her chakras all aligned in a straight line. But then like it's swirling out into the cosmos. And what I always talk about with this, why I got this specific tapestry, is because disease in our body starts on an energetic level. But in the Western world, we don't even notice it until it's testable, until it's come into the physical. So it's been out here the whole time, like starting to warp on your energy field. And this includes societal norms. This includes generational wounding. This includes things that you have absolutely zero control over it. You're not even aware of it. Even your subconscious is like barely aware of the amount of wounding that has occurred to your soul over the times. Like, you could have been a soul that this happened to. You could have been a soul who died because this happened to it. Like, when you look into past lives, when you look into all of this and you start really exploring the energetics of birth and the process of birthing and the stories that have been told around birth, you realize that there is all sorts of negative external energy around this process that has deluded many women in the Western world to think, like, not even just women, the insurance companies, you're all of a sudden sick when you get pregnant. Like, you all of a sudden are covered under maternity care, and you become sick, and you have to get all these tests and all these, like, all this intervention because you as a woman, you don't know how to birth. let me, the outside patriarchal world society, which is mostly what Western medicine is, let me tell you how to birth. Let me tell you what to do, because we have cut you off since the early 1900s. Even before that, the 1800s, there were a few midwives. Mostly doctors, though, that were going to the houses. Like I said in here earlier, it says until the 1800s, most women gave birth at home with a local midwife, okay? So then all of a sudden, you just had to do you did the birthing on your own. Anesthesia didn't become popular until the 1850s because the Queen of England, Queen Victoria, gave birth with anesthesia, with chloroform. Okay? And now, talking about twilight births. So I told you about the Inquisition and how there was this whole idea of the curse of Eve, like you have to be isolated, you have to be alone, all this stuff. So now we move up to, hi Natalia, hello. Thank you very much. So now we move up to the 1850s, Queen Victoria. Now some women, but only women that could really afford it, right? It was like if you were common and poor, you were still birthing at home with a midwife. Okay, so now all of a sudden we're classing birth. And it's no longer this beautiful, organic, God creating, like life creating moment. We have so many things around sex, but sex is what creates life. And then the next most beautiful, sacred thing is the actual birth of this life. And all of a sudden, it was a status thing, where if you could afford to give birth without all that pain, without the curse of Eve, like, ooh, you got a lot of money. But if you're common and you're poor, then you still have to deal with it. And you haven't, gotten out of it. Wealthy women, like I said, would travel. They would literally travel from wherever they were in Europe to go to, Germany or England or wherever to figure out how to have these painless births, right? Where what they were really doing was getting chloroformed and knocked unconscious, and hopefully the baby would come out. So then all of a sudden, women started demanding the right to have a twilight sleep. All of a sudden, women were demanding that they be knocked out unconscious to give birth, because they didn't want to experience it, because they wanted to be cut off from the most raw, authentic, beautiful process that was a part of them, because it was low. Okay, you were low. The savages did that. The slaves did that. The common whore had to give birth to the bastard baby that she had created. So there's this stigma around birthing naturally all of a sudden occurred in the West. Again, I want to emphasize this did not happen worldwide, but it happened in a lot of places. Okay, like Australia and the US, they're huge when it comes to this. Europe was huge at the time. They've actually come back, and more babies are born at home or in birthing centers in Europe than in the US or Australia. But and then all of a sudden there became this idea of a maternity ward in the hospitals. Why? Because there were all of a sudden all these complications that didn't exist before, and now all of a sudden this new idea of anesthesia and morphine. So they would use morphine, which is derived from opium, so highly, highly addictive, and scopolamine, which is a compound derivative of nightshade plants, where they would get semi-conscious state and experience amnesia. So they were purposefully drugging pregnant women with morphine and nightshade. Right as the baby was about to be born. This whole baby has, we haven't even gotten into the fact that, the whole time that you're processing a baby, growing a baby, you're imprinting on it. This is just the birth that I'm talking about right now, guys. This is just the physical process of birthing. We haven't even touched the monumentous amount of shit that occurs to the baby when it's in utero that you are doing to your baby, that is happening subconsciously. Every fear that you have, every moment that you think I can't have this baby, all of that is being imprinted. We're just talking about the birth. Women purposefully, to be seen as high standard in society, purposefully drugged themselves in labor with morphine and scopolamine, which is a derivative of nightshade. And they would be knocked unconscious and have no fucking idea what happened, not remembering the pain of labor, none of it at all. Women would lose awareness of what was happening to them. And then what would happen? Most women, a lot of them became uninhibited. A lot of them became psychotic. Women would forget where they were. They would start thrashing around and banging on their heads against the walls, clawing themselves, screaming, because they are semi-conscious, because they've taken nightshade and morphine, and now they're completely disconnected, and all they know is that they still kind of feel it. And this baby, you have nerves in your body all the way down that tells your body what point in labor you're at, and there's a point where they hit a nerve and it opens up, and it's called the urge to push, where all of a sudden you need to push. And if you were in like a semi-psychotic state, I can't even comprehend. I felt that urge twice, and it took everything in my being to focus on that urge and push the babies out of me. So to be semi-conscious during that time, of course they went fucking crazy. So what did they do? Oh no, they didn't stop using the nightshade. They didn't stop doing this, because most women, remember, they forgot. They were slightly amnesic, so they didn't remember. And this is when they started for sure forcing men to, like, you know that scene in the movies where the man's like smoking a cigar waiting? It was because the doctors knew that what they were doing was fucking unethical as shit, and they were still doing it anyway because they were making a fuck ton of money off of it, because all the wealthy people wanted to do it. Okay? So let's just remember this. These women would be psychotic, uninhibited, thrashing around. So what did they do? Wrapped them in straitjackets. I'm not lying, people. Google it. It's called twilight sleep. Fucked up. Okay? Or they would tie them to the bed. And this is when they invented stirrups to put the women on their backs with their feet up, because it was easier to catch the baby, even though for millennia prior to this, there's like a birthing squat. Women like to sit. There's a reason why birthing balls exist. Squatting and sitting in this, like sitting on a toilet like this, is actually the way that most women prefer to birth. Because gravity is helping them. They've got this feeling that urge to push is pulling down, and all this stuff is occurring and helping them, and they're connected with nature. And again, they're lining their chakras up for an energy purge as they push this baby out, and then the energy follows, and the placenta comes out, and everything is this nice, beautiful flow of energy, and you don't have all these like energetic cords that stay stuck. Versus when you're up here like this and trying to push, and mostly like leaned back and trying to push, and then they have to like help pull the placenta out, and maybe some pieces get like, guys, okay, again, I need to emphasize, I understand the need for actual emergency science. I love it. There was a third person. Another person, her uterus, like, she had an infection. I have to go back. I said earlier there were only 2 people I knew that had an emergency C-section that were legit. A third one, she totally just listened to her intuition. Premature baby, like, needed to happen. So 3 women out of the literally thousands of birth stories I've heard, like, I feel like were actually legitimate emergency C-section, which is what cesareans were made for. Cesareans were supposed to be for that tiny, tiny, like, 2% of women who had actual high-risk pregnancies, who had actual, like, medical emergencies occur. Because women have been birthing breech for millennia. Women have been birthing, like, every position that you can think of forever. So getting back to the twilight sleep, they're now straitjacketed. Their husbands are not allowed in the room. Remember, they're in another part of the whole fucking hospital at this point. And then women would wake up and their baby would be gone, because they've now created the NICU. They've now created this maternity ward, and babies were affected. The drugs would cross the placenta and depress the central nervous system. Babies would be born drugged. They wouldn't be breathing normally. Like, babies being held upside down and slapped on the bottom. That's not a joke. That's because the baby literally came out fucking practically dead, and they were trying to revive the comatose newborn baby from the fucking drugs that they were giving these women, that instead of stopping it, they just hid it from everyone. So, memory tests, and they tried to do all of these things, and then finally, in like the by the early 1970s, it was no longer routine for women to be anesthetized to the point of unconsciousness while their babies were forcibly removed from their body with forceps. So, 1970. Just sit with that for a minute. In America, majority of women birthed between 1870 to 1970. Drugged to the point of unconsciousness, thrashing around in straitjackets, having no idea what was going on with them, and then having their babies forcibly removed from them. And this wasn't just happening in America. Everywhere that was a first world country, this is what was happening there. So England, Germany was huge with it, Italy, all of Western Europe, all of America, all of Australia. Think about that. How many millions of babies were born that way? Forcibly removed from their mother's uterus or birth canal with forceps or a vacuum hose or whatever, while their mother was thrashing around unconscious, having no fucking clue what was happening to her. And then we wonder why we have a problem with resentment. So you guys want to know why the fuck I told you this crazy ass story? Luckily, in the 1970s, Ina May Gaskin showed up. She started kicking ass and taking names and bringing back the birth movement. And now we don't do that anymore. Now, what we do is cesareans. We've seen a dramatic rise in cesarean sections since the 1970s as women got better at, or technology got better at the actual surgery of it. OBGYNs are actually certified surgeons. They don't know anything about birth. Most of them, over 60% of them, have never witnessed a natural childbirth before, ever, in any of their doctoral years. They are precision surgeons who know how to cut you the fuck open and get the baby out safely. That's what OBGYNs know how to do. Midwives, however, know all about your pussy, know all about your hormones, know all about how to get the baby out, know all these because some of the witches didn't burn. Because some areas kept this and anthropologists went and found it. The reason why I am so fucking blessed to have been able to birth my babies the way that I did in such a healthy, safe way is because of women going out and continuing to break the norm within my society so that I could do that. So that we could, because I don't care about the cesarean sections, again, beautiful thing when necessary. The problem is that the word emergency gets thrown around way too often. Women aren't told how to trust their bodies. Women aren't taught from a very young age about birth or birthing or the birth process or the baby making process or any of it. They don't even know that they have anything. Oh, thanks, Natalia. I'm glad it resonated with you. So the resentment comes in when I ask moms, what is your biggest issue? They have all this guilt. They've got all this guilt that they don't know where it came from. They're like, I'm taking care of my kids. I feel like I'm doing the best I can, but every time that I fuck up, I feel super, super guilty. And this was around every type of mother. It didn't matter what her background was. It didn't matter what her age was. It didn't matter what her financial stability was. It didn't matter if she was single or married. It didn't matter if she was in a mixed family or not. Every single mother I've talked to has a problem with mommy guilt. Or more so mommy shame. I talked about this 2 days ago in a live or on Sunday. You want to learn all about the difference between mommy shame and mommy guilt? You go watch that. It's about an hour long of awesome, intense, blow your brain shit about motherhood. But this mommy guilt or mommy shame shows up, and it got me thinking. Why? And then I started remembering everything that I had learned in 2014 and 2015 when I was prepping to do childbirth naturally at my house for the first time. And then again in 2016, 2017 when I was preparing to do it again. And ended up birthing her 100% on my own because my midwife and my doula didn't show up because I knew what I was doing and I was prepared, and I know like 3 of my friends who have all given birth that way that like were not planning on doing it. Another 2 or 3 that did plan on doing unassisted. Like, it's coming back. And every single one of those women has begun the process of the generational wounding healing. But until you're able to cut cords and you're able to process this fully and you're able to get the trauma out of your DNA, it's still only surface level shit. You can feel great and be like, you know what, my life's actually pretty good. But if I ask you 1 or 2 key questions, all of a sudden that facade starts crumbling. And you start realizing that there's actually all this other shit you didn't even know existed because it's not yours. Because it's your grandmother's or your great-grandmother's. Or, you know, maybe, again, that witch that was burned at the stake. Maybe she had just given birth a week before. And that baby is now like growing up alone in the world, doesn't know why, and all this stuff, and all those twilight bursts that I just told you about, that fucking traumatizing shit. And it's still occurring now because I'm about to blow your brain with some statistics, guys. It is safer, as of 2014, I believe, 2014 or 2015, it is safer to birth a baby in Zimbabwe, Africa, than it is to birth a baby in Detroit, Michigan. One more time. It is safer to birth a baby in Zimbabwe than it is to birth in Detroit, Michigan, USA. Detroit, Michigan has one of the highest rates of maternal death in the world. Just that one city. Detroit, Michigan has had a lot of poverty hit it recently when it used to be super poppin', right? That's where all the cars were made back in the day. The reason why maternal death rate, which is a death, let's see if I can find maternal, I want to give you guys the actual like definition so that you don't like be like, oh, she's a liar, she didn't tell me. Definition of maternal death rate is a woman who dies within, I believe it's 6 weeks. Maternal is the ratio of maternal deaths during a given time period per 100,000 births. I'm trying to remember. I believe it's within 6 weeks. Pregnancy caused during trial within 42 days. Okay. The maternal mortality ratio is the ratio of the number of maternal deaths given during a given time period per 100,000 live births during the same time period. A maternal death refers to female death from any cause related to or aggravated by pregnancy or its management, including accidental or incidental causes, during pregnancy and childbirth or within 42 days of termination of pregnancy, in respective of the duration and site of the pregnancy. So all that means is within 42 days. So about 6 weeks. The maternal death rate is so fucking high. And if you looked at a graph of like the rest of the world's like maternal death rate is like this. And like I'm talking about like, Zimbabwe and all these, the whole rest of the world, it goes like this. Since like the 1800s. When you look at America and Australia, it goes like this. No shit, it's like about to get exponential. One out of every 3 babies 1 out of every 3 babies is born via cesarean section in America. 1 out of every 3 babies is born via cesarean section in America as of 2017. 1 out of every 3. Decline. This is too important. I was a cesarean birth. It's true. I know lots of people who've given birth cesarean. I know lots of people my age that were cesarean births. Because in the 80s, lots of people were. There was this whole thing thinking that babies' heads were too big. It's a big one. Again, they now had taken away twilight births, but they were still had like the drugs that an epidural. We don't have to totally knock her out, but let's just take the pain away. And let's continue letting women know that once they're pregnant, they get to be put into our hands. And we get to make a fuck ton of money off of all these women and all these babies and all these interventions and all these things we're going to do. Like, follow the money. There's a beautiful movie called Business of Being Born. It's kind of outdated, but it talks about, like, follow the money. The money is where it goes, and it doesn't nobody gives a fuck about the moms. So the maternal mortality rate, the reason why it's going up in America is because our cesarean rate is going up in America. So in Detroit, Michigan, they're so poor, and there's so many people on Medicaid that they have all these overworked staff members at the hospital, so they're making all these fucking stupid slip-ups. And they have a really high cesarean rate there. So that's like in general, it's 1 in 3, but there are literally cities in America where it's like 1 in every 2 babies, like half. Like, and then you think about it, oddly enough, but you can like 1.25, like 75% of babies, because it's this like small town and everyone just gets like cranked through this hospital. But those places that have higher cesarean rates have higher maternal mortality rates, versus areas that have higher natural birth rates have lower maternal death rates, because of the beauty of modern medicine, that if you are having a home birth and something goes wrong, it's more likely that you're going to be able to get picked up by the ambulance or make it to the hospital and be saved than ever before in history. So lots of people are like, yeah, but lots of people used to die, and how could you put your child at risk? And yada. Like, I clocked it. An ambulance can get to my house and I can get to the hospital within 7 minutes. And if I've got my midwife here and everything like that, we should be able to keep me and my baby alive for 7 minutes. Like, it's doable. That's what emergency C-sections are actually for. Not to be like, okay, well, just plan on, like, if you're going to get induced at, like, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, just plan that you're probably going to have a cesarean by 1 o'clock in the morning that night. Just plan on it. Like, if that's what you're going to do, just might as well just schedule what time you want the baby born and be cut open, because of the amount that your likelihood of having the cesarean happens every time you add a different intervention. Like Pitocin, and then the epidural, and then the whatever. So these women in Detroit, they're finding them dead weeks later after leaving the hospital, because their incisions have gotten infected, and they don't have time to take off of work to go to the hospital. And they're finding all these complications occurring, and internal bleeding and all these hemorrhaging and all this shit. So that's the reason why our maternal mortality rate's going up. So then you talk to women just in general who have had C-sections. The way that you recover from a C-section is fucking intense, guys. I have helped lots of my friends through it. I have witnessed it. It is ridiculous. They cut open your uterus. They have to go through, like, they're removing musculature, like, they have to remove your bladder, and then they get to the baby and take the baby out, and then they sew you all back up again. Like, it is massive, major abdominal surgery. Massive, major abdominal surgery. That is now bypassing this. The baby no longer goes through the birth canal and gets processed and has this beautiful energy of light and cleansing and has this gorgeous, beautiful moment. It's being, like, ripped out of their mom and, like, down the conveyor belt into the NICU. Make sure everything's okay. Next. Sorry, something's coming through. So in another 50 years, in another 100 years, this is what they're going to be talking about. They're going to be like, did you know back in the 1500s they used to say that women had to go birth by themselves? And then in the early 1900s they had these women chained up in twilight birth. And then by the early 2000s, the cesarean rate got so high that the maternal mortality rate got so high. And then all of a sudden there was this huge birth movement and all the mommies got together and they realized that they were fucking up generations to come and had already been, and they healed all this stuff that had happened for 2 millennia before, 5 millennia before. And now here we are back to beautiful birthing, and we have the miraculousness of modern medicine, and our maternal and infant mortality ratio is like nothing, and we have all this world peace and yummy, delicious, pretty life that we can have, this utopia even, if you want to go that far. That could occur if we dealt with the generational wounding that we're dealing with now. If we actually handled the generational wounding. So the reason why I felt like it was so important for you guys to know this stuff is because it's not talked about. I mean, I talk about it a lot because I'm a birth nerd, and I hang out with people who talk about it a lot because they're birth nerds. But when I'm trying to help mothers, they wonder why they resent their kids so much. And my first question is, if you feel like you have so much guilt and you feel like you have so much resentment, can you tell me your birth story with your babies? Each one. And they'll list off, 1, 2, however, all the different birth stories. And by the end, we have unleashed a bunch of trauma. There's all these things that all of a sudden, once you start remembering your birth, now that they're not totally knocked out. Because I guarantee you, if you try to ask your mama or your grandma about her birth, she don't remember it. Because they weren't allowed to talk about it. They remember maybe a couple. Like my mom, that was only 30 years ago, so she remembers it. But like, if my grandmother was still alive, she probably wouldn't remember any of my mom or her siblings' births. Because she probably birthed in this twilight state. So we realized that by uncovering the birth story and really digging into that and, grieving the birth that you didn't get to have, it's almost, it's like it's the same amount of importance whether your baby lived or whether your baby didn't. And the reason why I brought this up right now is because October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness. Now, what people don't think about is that when you give birth in a cesarean way, you've kind of lost your pregnancy. You have, you especially if your body didn't go into birth, into labor naturally. Even the people that have scheduled their cesareans, they don't realize that they're doing this on an energetic level, that you've lost your pregnancy. You didn't get to go through the magical process of getting the divine intuitive hit here to start activating all the hormones and all the things that go down and then start going in here and help you to birth your baby. So when you have women who have birthed their baby and then never got to take their baby home with them, there's a whole other level of trauma that you have to unravel there. But they still had their birth still mattered. They're still mothers. So it's same with you. If you got to keep your baby at home, but you resent the fuck out of how they came into this world, you're gonna resent the fuck out of your kid without really realizing it. Or if you feel like it's just been one thing after the other with them. At first it started with the C-section, and then there was this, and then there was that, and then there was this, and then there was that, and they're this super sick kid, and there's all these things going on with them. And you were able to heal the fact that they were a cesarean baby to begin with. You would start seeing that because you cut the energetic cord, that it no longer has strength, and then once they're at a certain age, you can help them cut the cord, the final piece. So if you think of your family line as a giant umbilical cord going through every uterus from every person in your family, going all the way through you to your kids, and you take responsibility to cut everything that's coming this way into you and letting it be and letting the past lay, then it's going to be so much easier for this line to either heal directly into your child. I hear it all the time from women telling me that as soon as they took over their self-development and their personal development, all of a sudden their kids like fell into line and they didn't really have to do anything. And it's because as you cut the energetic cords and you cut all the shit from behind you, it's making that tie, that negativity weaker between your womb and your child. And like men have it too, like you don't have a womb, but as soon as you pass your sperm into your wife and impregnate her, those generational wounds have now latched onto your child. Like it doesn't have to just be womb to womb. It's easier to process through women who have, because of our womb space, we can, like, there's an actual physical place, but men can deal with their generational wounding as well, and it still affects their children in a positive way. You just might see it more quickly or more obviously if you are having, if you're the woman who has this healing done. So you all of a sudden realize that you have this story around how you birthed. Hi, Rosemary. You all of a sudden have this story around how they birthed, and you are adding to the trauma of all the births prior. If you're just jumping on, like I just got into twilight births and all this shit that's been going on for women forever. And you realize that you are holding on to all this energy, and as soon as you are the one who cuts the energy yourself, you are able to start healing for your child. And once your child gets to a certain age, you can start helping them with processing their wounds and cutting cords for themselves. Like my 10-year-old, he and I are starting to do that. And my 3-year-old, there's some things that I'm able to just like mentally imagine, like if this is ready to fall away, like let it fall away, like let me be the mom and like let me do my part to try to cut that. And you have to remember that your child, like every child, chose the life that they're in for a reason. Their souls chose their own path. So there's a certain level of that you need to understand with the mommy guilt. Like, don't feel guilty about shit that you used to do prior to this knowledge, because in a way it's everything that your child needed to make their soul's journey better. So there's that aspect of that we're able to heal just within that knowledge. Understanding the energetics of being a mother can seriously change so much without you doing anything, without implementing any parenting tactics, without reading any parenting books, without going to, parenting not like child psychologists or anything like that. You taking control of your own life and the own energies and doing everything you can to heal the roots of the tree up until your piece of the branch is going to affect the rest of your piece of your branch. If I'm just a branch right now and I've got 1, 2, 3 little nubbins coming off of me right now, eventually those nubbins are going to make more buds and stuff like that. So if I can make my chunk of my family tree cleaned out, and I did a generational wounding meditation a couple of months ago. I'm going to post it for you guys. I'll post it in my group. So if you guys are not part of the Care For You community, let me know and I'll add you to it, and I will post this meditation in my group. We actually did a whole generational wounding healing with envisioning roots and bringing ourselves to our part of the tree, and really cleaning out that energy. But when we work together, we'll be able to dig into this individually for your line, and you'll be able to see this, and you'll be able to open up these conversations to make these conversations easier to have with your children, to have with your daughters, even to have with your sons. If you're able to talk to your son about all this shit that's gone in your family line and help him to process it, he's now become a clean energy conduit for his posterity and his, not that it's only going to be her shit that's stuck on your kids, but you can be solid in knowing that you have done absolutely everything in your power to help yourself, to help your kids, and to help your grandchildren afterwards. So really healing it without judging it. So you hear me going off about the births and all this fucked up shit that happened in the birthing process, and I might sound pretty judgy, but it's because it's mind-blowing to me. I can't even comprehend that doctors would rather just make husbands hide in the waiting room while they drugged up their wives and cut them open. that's what you hear in my voice, is like just my passion and my frustration that this is even something that occurred. But not to judge yourself. You never ever want to judge yourself for where you are on your journey, because your soul chose your journey, your children's souls chose their journey. We all go together, and through generational healing, through energetic healing, through orgasmic healing, through all these things of clearing out that womb space, of really activating your sacral chakra and clearing anything that's blocking it, and really initiating the safety of your family line. Because your root chakra is all about safety and security and your needs, and then your sacral chakra is about your play and your desire and your want to move forward. So if your family story, your family lines are not safe because of all this energetic crap that is stuck on them from thousands of years, and all this like, not even talking about society, guys, I'm just talking about your bloodline, like the shit's happened to your mom, to her mom, to her, all the way back. When you deal with that, you're all of a sudden activating your lower two chakras in a way that is revolutionary, in a way that no one else is doing it right now, because talking about birth and talking about loss and trauma and things like that, when it comes to having a health, like, who are you to talk to someone about your birth process when you got to bring your baby home? You know, who are you to talk about your birth process when you didn't bring your baby home? Think about how many women this month are sitting here thinking, I wish someone would tell me that I'm being, like, that I'm a good mother, even though I don't have a baby. Like, I'm still a mother. I have an angel baby. And helping process that, like, even a miscarriage, like, that was a life that occurred, even for as few amount of weeks as it was there. There's still grieving to occur. There's still energetics that are there. There's still an action and an experience that occurred that is making you go one way or another in your life. So, is there anything else I want to talk to you about this? No, I think that if you are really interested in this, I would really encourage you guys to research on your own. I know that it sounds weird because I'm a coach, right? So you would mostly expect me to be like, come buy from me. But this video is something that I really just felt needed to tell you about, because it is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, and 2 days ago was Infant and Pregnancy Loss Awareness Day. And I've been really holding in my heart all of my mother's friends who have angel babies. And realizing that even moms who don't have angel babies still grieve what they expected their motherhood to look like, what they expected their birth to look like, what they expected their pregnancy to look like. Maybe they were so excited to get pregnant, and then they were sick as a fucking dog for the whole 9 months and built up all this resentment. And if we are able to heal this, then why wouldn't you? And like I said, feel free to join my community. I'll leave the link here in this video for you to join the Care For You community, and that way you can get access to that meditation, the generational wounding meditation. And if you have any questions, if you're a mom who's ready to take responsibility and really step into this role of clearing these generational woundings, of dealing with the energy that's left over from your own birth, then please reach out to me, and I would love to help you in that process of healing. And if you ever have any other questions about birth or healing or motherhood healing or pleasurable parenting or any of the other stuff that I've been talking about, please don't hesitate to reach out to me via Facebook Messenger. So thank you, Natalia. I did see that you had a comment. I want to read this really quick before. My mom had 2 abortions, and she didn't have her grief and affected her greatly. She was always sad for many reasons, but my mom, being the last born, she took a lot of crap as a resentment. It's bizarre and sad. We are lucky to have access to this info. Yes, we are. We're lucky to have access. Women don't even process their abortions because they think that they made the choice for, like, a reason, and they, like, just have to live with it. There's plenty of work to be done around all of it. If you're someone who's never been able to get pregnant, there could be just, like, literally could be generational wounding that is causing your uterus to shut down because you are just so fucking traumatized that you don't want to give any of that to another life. So when you actually do the womb healing and cut all those cords and open yourself up to parent from a whole new paradigm without using anything else as a guide except for your own heart and your own energy system, your own conduit to the universe. Look at all those infinite amount of stars and knowledge that she can have that she has to just pull into her. But if there's like things blocking her, if it was like this and it was just blocked the whole time and you couldn't see the rest of the picture, like her life isn't very fun or happy if she's just like this. Then what if her like chakras are all like cut off and blocked and all this other stuff? Like when you don't have these two chakras here because you're cut off from wounding, from generational issues, then you're only working with 5/7 of the power that you have in you. Even though you think, oh, everything's great and everything's nice and lined up, things can be nice and lined up, but like they're still blocked, right? Or even being scared too. Yeah, that's a huge fear that some women have, and that's why they use birth control and they pump their bodies full of all these hormones and things like that instead of tracking their own cycles. Like, I know that there's this running joke with people that are like, oh, the Irish Catholics, they just, every sperm is sacred. That's a thing from Monty Python. And there's just like this woman with like thousands of children or whatever. But in some areas of the world, women just tracked their cycles and they knew not to have sex at a certain time because that's when they were going to get pregnant. And this is like way before an app. You know, they just tracked it themselves. This knowledge was already available. So, being able to naturally work through not getting pregnant instead of allowing, again, the PWC, the Patriarchal World Society, to come in and be like, oh, you know what, let's just block off your hormones. You're still doing this again. Your adrenal glands are right here between your they sit on top of your kidneys, so it's right in between your solar plexus and your sacral chakra. So birth control absolutely cuts off these two energy sources as well. So if you think that your life is totally awesome and you still have energetic wounding, and realize that it's like being 5/7 awesome. And how much more awesome could your life be if you were using all 7? If you could get all 7 cleared and all 7 going and all 7 like vroom, 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 like you're gonna just blast off into the stratosphere at that point, and everyone's gonna want to follow you, and you're gonna be like, so the thing is, what I had to do was pretty scary and intense, and it took a lot out of me to be able to dig deep and heal not only my wounds, but my mother's and my grandmother's, and then my grandpa, and then there was over here. So when you start putting in, like, I'm not even just talking about past lives, that's a whole other life. I'm actually going to have my friend Holly hopefully come on because she's like the Akashic queen. She knows everything about that. You have to realize that you are a part of a massive tree. You are a point of energy in a never-ending stream of energy. But if you are at this point and there has been wounding, every time a generation goes by where that wound wasn't healed, it gets bigger. It's like having a pebble in your pocket when you're the one that it happened to, or maybe it's a bigger rock, you know, like many lost births, like 5 miscarriages and 2 stillbirths, like a lot. So it's like it's pretty heavy, and you put it in your pocket, but you still are able to like move. You make it through your life. You do it, or maybe you don't. There's women who have committed suicide because of their inability to conceive. But the next generation that has to deal with that, it's like your little rock that was this big is now like this big for your kid. And now it gets this big and this big. And now you are all the way here to 2000s where we've got all of this stuff, and we are carrying all of this stuff and holding it up and trying to get through life, and we're so compressed and so out of whack and so shut off. And we don't know. We're like, oh, we're doing awesome. Like, so look at me right now. I'm closed down, but I'm still straight, okay? My neck is straight. My spine is straight. You might not be able to see it from this angle, but like my spine is straight. Oh, I'm aligned. I'm balanced. I'm in a right spot right now, but I'm so blocked off right now that all these extra, I have to constantly be like balancing and making sure that everything works out here in this tiny little realm that I can control because I'm so blocked off, that if you were to then be like, okay, well, what if I opened this up? And then I open this up. And you notice how my spine's not moving, but all of a sudden there's all this space and all this light and all this energy. And now look at how much I can affect because I've taken the time to untwist and unwind and get rid of all the crap that wasn't even mine. Because I thought I was aligned. I thought it was good. Because you had dealt with a whole bunch of your own shit. You're on top of it. You're like reading and meditating. You're doing everything that you're supposed to do and you feel great. I'm affecting change. And if you were to just take it that one step further and take responsibility in a way that no one else in your entire bloodline has ever been able to take responsibility before, then you could all of a sudden affect this much change. 360, guys. All the way. And the choice is yours. I can't make it happen for you. I can't do the work for you. I can help you. I can tell you all about it. I got lots of stories. But it's you that has to make the decision. So, thank you so much for watching. I know this went long. Again, I was going to post in the thing for the Care For You community. I'll make sure I do that. And then I will post that, that meditation in there right now too. I'll download it and make sure that it uploads in there so that you guys can do that. I believe it's about 45 minutes, so make sure you give yourself time. It was part of a full moon ritual a couple of months ago, so you might have to like fast forward through some things first to get to the actual part of the meditation. So, and I'll see if I can like find a way to edit that out. I don't know how to comment on my computer. This is really stupid. Anyway, I don't know what's happening. I'll figure it out. I'll add that link so that you guys can join me. Thank you so much for watching, Natalia. Everyone else who popped on, I really appreciate it. I hope that you learned something. Go ahead and go research Twilight Burst and The Curse of Eve if you're interested in that. And I will talk to you all soon. Love you. Oh, and feel free to share this if you know any mommies that this could